if there are young people in the room who want to make sure they taste the cookies at the Oneg, this would be a perfect time to get going. Make sure you taste them for a good solid 10 minutes. Make sure that they're all acceptable desserts. In addition to some of the most traumatizing images we have ever watched continue to appear on our screens, we have also seen coming from the political left deeply upsetting but entirely predictable one-sided condemnations of Israel. And as our hearts are eaten out by the humanitarian disaster in Israel and Gaza, I want to ask everyone to remember 4 reasons why Israel cannot agree to an immediate unconditional ceasefire, even though so many are calling for one. First, Hamas must go. If they don't, what happened on October 7th will happen again. No one should try to appease terrorism. It only emboldens more terrorism. A ceasefire at this point rewards Hamas and leaves them in place. In Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, we read, "There is a time for war and a time for peace." We are not at peace, and no amount of wishful thinking will make it so. Hamas has never stopped firing rockets. As Yossi Klein Halevi has written, yes, it's a trap. Yes, there has to be an end game for Gaza. Yes, Israel must learn from the lessons of the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, Hamas is an idea, not just an organization. All that is true, and that doesn't change the fact that these barbarians must still go. And to all of the politicians and so-called human rights groups that are calling for an immediate ceasefire, where is your call for the unconditional surrender of Hamas and the return of hostages? In what moral universe does it make sense to say otherwise? And would you have called for a ceasefire with Al-Qaeda right after 9/11? Of course not. Second, and more importantly, Israel must regain deterrence against Iran and its proxies. This is really one battle in a war with Iran, and if Israel is seen as weak, it will only invite larger conflict. Adonai oz li'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. God gives strength to your people. God bless your people with peace. If there is no strength, there is no peace. Otherwise, this is just blood in the water, inviting more violence. And we should remember that if Iran really loves the Palestinians so much, Iran's nuclear program would destroy the Palestinians too. The Palestinians are being used as sacrificial pawns. Third, Israel is entitled to self-defense even at the cost of civilian lives. This is according to Jewish tradition. This is a milchemet mitzvah, a war of the mitzvah of self-defense. It is not cherem, genocide, nor is it a milchemet reshut, a war to acquire property. The rabbis ruled those rationales were obsolete long ago. This war is a mitzvah, a commandment, a responsibility to protect the nation. Israel will need to conduct itself according to Jewish values as stated in the Ethical Purity of Arms, Ruach Tzahal, a document that every Israeli soldier carries. The world's fickle solidarity and hypocritical outrage don't matter. Ethics matter, not world opinion, or even the views of our neighbors, even though that often feels lonely. Finally, the hostages must be brought home now. Why isn't every human rights organization in the world shouting for this from the rooftops? The slow release of a couple of hostages is a part of Hamas's psychological warfare, not just on Israelis, but on you. How can anyone rationalize a ceasefire while they are still holding hostages, including babies? Pidyon Shivuim, the redemption of captives, is also a Jewish value. Israel's army has been ready, but has delayed its entry into Gaza to allow humanitarian zones to be established and to do everything it can to free hostages. It has already shown a much higher ethical standard than Hamas. Drawing an equivalence between the two is offensive. And again, I just want to reiterate that we are also watching the horrifying reports on children in Gaza. It is beyond belief. This is not a heartless calculation, but as a broken-hearted Israeli woman cried, "I care about Palestinian mothers, but Hamas doesn't care." For those who say that history didn't begin on October 7th and that these events didn't happen in a vacuum, such as the spokespeople at Jewish Voices for Peace or at the United Nations, you say this isn't a justification for Hamas, but it sounds an awful lot like one. You have conflated the occupation with Hamas's motives. Hamas is not fighting because of the occupation. They are murdering because of their religious beliefs about Jews. In their fantasies, they are saving the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is not frustration at being kept down. This is anti-Semitic hatred and demonization. There is a meme going around. Yeah, but what was Israel wearing? Look at the rush to condemn Israel for the destruction of the hospital based on Hamas propaganda. Why is the world so ready to regurgitate Hamas's headlines? What anti-Semitic mythology has the world internalized to make that happen? Or as Klein Halevi asks, how is it possible that Israel is being blamed for the Hamas massacre and that there is more outrage to the response to the massacre than the massacre itself? If we do want to talk about history, I would hasten to add that history also goes back to 2006 when Hamas was elected, and to 2000 and 1947 when the Palestinians rejected a two-state solution. The expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Jews from Arab lands. Those descendants make up the majority of Jewish Israelis. They're also part of the story. The suicide bombers, hijackings, and anti-Semitic incitement also matter. Too many people have their history backwards. It's not that the occupation caused this war and terrorism. It's that war and terrorism initially caused the occupation. And this is where we are stuck. And if you are actually pro-Hamas, you are an anti-Semite, and you are not pro-Palestinian. The Israeli military cannot create peaceful coexistence, but they can rescue hostages and dismantle immediate threats. And Israelis are also going to get killed when they go in. I'm terrified for my family. But what's the alternative? A real victory will include moving ahead with normalization with the rest of the world, which the Hamas attack has tried to derail. Friends, be proud of your Zionism. Be unapologetic. If you want to talk about indigenous people and decolonization, remember that Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel, and the re-decolonization was when they threw the British out. We have a responsibility to defend ourselves and our borders in our historic homeland. I want to give everyone a glimmer of hope for the future. It may sound crazy to say, but Palestinians and Jews actually have some very important things in common. It's true. First, no one else wants us. Jewish people had nowhere to go after World War II. Even America, which has been very good to the Jewish people, turned away the ship, the St. Louis, full of Jewish refugees and sent it back to Europe. And no neighboring country wants the Palestinians, and they never have. Egypt doesn't want them, and neither does Jordan. Second, we are both indigenous to the land. On an AIPAC mission, I met an Israeli Arab man whose family had been in the land of Israel for at least 12 generations and who still had land deeds dating back to the Ottomans. If that's not indigenous, I don't know what is. The Bedouins are another example, as are the Druze. Their history goes back thousands of years. This tiny piece of real estate has many children. In the Tanakh, there are always different peoples in the land, some of whom were bound to Israel through treaties. Finally, Jews and Palestinians both live in this small space in large numbers, in the millions, and no one is going anywhere. So, let us hope. When Hamas is no longer fanning the flames of extremism, and when Israel elects a new government, that we can get back to the work of peace building. Let there be Kohelet's time of peace. I will conclude with the words of Noah Tishby, an Israeli actress, author, and activist. Above all, I am grateful that for the generations to come, the Jewish people will still live, love, and thrive, and reach out a hand to the world. And Hamas will be nothing but a footnote in history, just like those who tried to exterminate us before. Am Yisrael Chai.